On August 21st, 2017, people in North America became fascinated when a rare solar eclipse occurred from the west coast to the east coast, giving many people an opportunity to witness this rare event in person. I remember, I was fascinated by it. And because the path of totality was not far from my home in Knoxville, Tennessee, I decided to pick a spot that would give me the best view. The spot I chose was right there in Ray County.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I got you.
Okay. Oh, this is really cool. Oh my god.
Woo! Oh my gosh.
It's dark.
Yeah! Woo!
Okay. Okay. This is I don't even know how to describe this. This is so cool. This is not a filter. Look out behind me. Wow. This is incredible. This is like the coolest thing. 2:30 in the afternoon during an eclipse. This is video I shot that day. Witnessing a totality of an eclipse was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. What's funny is that everyone knew exactly what day, what time, and what path the eclipse would take, down to the minute. I'm not surprised that 21st century humans knew this in advance. What might be surprising is that humans have been accurately predicting solar eclipses for thousands of years. These days, we have computers to assist with that. But how did the ancients predict these without the aid of computers? Well, because of an archaeological discovery, we now believe the ancients, or at least the wealthy, powerful ones, may have had access to a computer, just not the kind you're thinking of. When you think of the first computer, what comes to mind? Probably either a clunky desktop or maybe even one of those machines that filled entire rooms. But an archaeological discovery made over a century ago uncovered a machine that was far more advanced than we ever realized these ancient civilizations actually were. And before you think that this is going to be another one of those,
the only way the ancient astronaut theory can be disproven is when the extraterrestrials show up.
It's not. But there is one discovered piece of technology that took over 70 years for researchers to even determine what its exact purpose was. And that is something known as the Antikythera mechanism. What is this thing? Who built it? And what exactly did it even do? Well, while there's a lot we do know about the Antikythera mechanism, there's also a lot we don't know about it. What we do know speaks volumes about just how sophisticated the ancients truly were, compared to what we thought they were. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I could get all the answers with the limited research I conducted. My objective was to acquire enough information to pass along to the average person, so that they could get a better understanding of the Antikythera mechanism's background and history. Many written and video publications tend to focus on either just one or just not enough aspects of the Antikythera mechanism without a whole lot of context itself. For the record, it's not aliens who made this thing. So, let's get started with uncovering the who, what, where, how, and why the Antikythera mechanism was created. In order to give proper context, it might appear as if I'm jumping all over the place, topic-wise. If you sit through the entire film, hopefully you'll see by the end that I presented certain specific information at a certain time, as to give the appropriate context. While I do conduct extensive research on all my films and videos, because of the historical and archaeological implications involved, I provided the actual references at the end of this film. If something appears to be a fact, I'll present it as a fact and cite it. If I'm not 100% certain something is a fact, I'll make that clear too. But even those educated guesses are all based on some sort of historical or archaeological evidence or theory, which will all be provided at the end in detail for those who wish to pick apart my evidence. I stand by all the information presented here in the same manner someone publishing a dissertation would. And no, again, it wasn't aliens. Sorry, crazy hair guy. So, to begin, what exactly is the Antikythera mechanism? To answer that, we have to start by going back to an early 20th century archaeological expedition off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, on the edge of the Aegean Sea. In April of 1900, a team of sponge divers from the Greek island of Symi, led by Captain Dimitrios Kondos, were on their way to the fishing waters off of North Africa. While waiting for more preferable sailing conditions, they detoured to the island of Antikythera. To pass the time, the sponge divers began exploring the waters off of Antikythera, and shortly after descending on one diving expedition, diver Aelius Stadiatis saw an underwater scene that horrified him to a point that he began quickly signaling to be brought back up to the surface. Once back up on the boat, Stadiatis described a shipwreck scene where mountains of rotting corpses and horses scattered along the sea floor. Convinced Stadiatis was hallucinating, Captain Kondos donned the diving suit and descended into the ocean depth himself. When Kondos returned to the surface, he had the arm of a bronze statue in hand. We now know those corpses and horses to be statues from the 1st century BC. Not long after the shipwreck discovery, Captain Kondos and his crew set out for what they were originally there for, sponge fishing off the coast of North Africa. However, after the fishing season ended, the captain and his crew returned to Antikythera and recovered a handful of additional artifacts, only to report the shipwreck to Athens authorities, who promptly sent a recovery team to support the salvage efforts of archaeologists. Beginning in November of 1900, Captain Kondos and his crew began working in cooperation with the Royal Hellenic Navy and the Greek Education Ministry in an effort to recover the contents of the still mysterious shipwreck. By the summer of 1901, the recovery effort was put on halt due to the death of diver Yorgos Kritikos, on top of 2 additional divers suffering from decompression sickness, resulting in paralysis for both men. At some point not too long after, recovery efforts resumed and continued through 1902. On May 17, 1902, while examining one of the artifacts that is reported to have been recovered in possibly July of 1900, archaeologist Valerios Stais made a discovery. Because of the condition all these artifacts were in after remaining submerged for thousands of years, initially identifying items was difficult without a thorough examination. While examining a particular box-shaped object, Stais realized one of the corroded pieces had a distinguishable gear wheel embedded in it. By this time, the date of the shipwreck and its contents was estimated to be sometime before the birth of Christ. But this easily recognizable gear wheel was something that resembled the same type of gears used in clocks. The problem was that conventional scholars of the time understood that clocks and machines of this nature originated at some point after the 13th century, with a few possible examples of large, complicated machines using gears sometime earlier, but not much earlier. From an archaeological perspective, it would be like finding the remnants of a smartphone inside one of the pyramids of Egypt. And while there is some evidence of gear-type clocks possibly dating prior to the 13th century, even those required water to operate properly. The idea of a mechanical device that utilized gears originating anytime in the BC era was completely unknown to historians and archaeologists at the time. So, the quest for determining what this mysterious Antikythera mechanism was began. To determine where and when the Antikythera mechanism originated from, there is some evidence that aids in that investigation. There's the cargo and other items recovered from the shipwreck, not to mention the ship itself. Researchers and scholars have spent decades sifting through everything available regarding the shipwreck to determine the Antikythera mechanism's origins. The physical properties of the Antikythera mechanism consist of an object encased in a wooden box measuring 13.4 inches by 7.1 inches by 3.5 inches, or 340 millimeters by 180 millimeters by 90 millimeters, for any viewers who use the metric system.
Oh man, they got the metric system, they wouldn't know what the f*** a quarter pounder is.
Since its discovery, the initial artifact has been dissected into 3 different fragments. Those fragments have since been transformed into 82 different pieces. 4 different gears have been discovered amongst the 82 different pieces. The largest gear measures 5.5 inches, or 140 millimeters in diameter, and actually had 223 teeth. Now, if you realize 223 is a prime number, you'd be right, and I'll discuss the use of prime numbers in this device shortly. But we also know through compositional analysis that the mechanism was probably made of 95% copper and 5% tin. Testing has also shown the artifact recovered was built at some point around 100 BC. The mechanism itself uses gears very similar to how analog clocks work. Covering the outside of the mechanism are 2 panels. One of the panels features the 12 zodiac signs, separated equally by 30-degree sectors. A rotatable ring is visible and features the Sothic Egyptian calendar, which may appear very familiar to us today. It measures the year with 12 monthly cycles and 365 days. The device takes into account leap years too, but it should be noted the Egyptian calendar used did not. From a technical standpoint, it's believed that the device takes into account the leap year by having the gears turn the pointer back one day every 4 years. The months are labeled with the Egyptian names, but uses Greek lettering to identify them. To be more specific, the Corinthian month names are written in a Doric dialect of the Koine Greek language. By turning a hand crank that is believed to have been on the side of the mechanism, the numerous internal gears would have rotated the pointers, allowing the user to select a given date during a 19-year period or a 235-month period. On the other side of the mechanism is another panel that displays the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and the 5 known planets at the time: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Even though the mechanism is geocentric, meaning it treats the Earth as the center of the solar system, the celestial movements represented are remarkably accurate, especially when predicting when either solar or lunar eclipses took place. One of the ways this was accurately accomplished was by the numerous gears housed inside the device itself. A few moments ago, I mentioned a discovered gear that had 223 teeth. Solar and lunar eclipses occur every 223 months, with solar eclipses only occurring on a new moon, and a lunar eclipse only occurring on a full moon. A 64-tooth gear, working in conjunction with 2 separate 38-tooth gears, helped accurately portray the passing of a single year on the device. There was also a dial on the back of the device whose gears displayed a 19-year, 235 lunar month calendar. This was based on the Metonic cycle calendar. This specific calendar is still used today to determine the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah and the Christian holiday of Easter. One thing to note is that modern advanced NASA technology tells us that the ellipse of the moon's orbit rotates by a full turn every 9 years. The moon accelerates while reaching the perigee and slows down towards the apogee. It's this same advanced modern NASA technology that also tells us the difference between the apogee and perigee is just 0.112579655 turns a year. Remarkably, the Antikythera mechanism takes this difference into account too. No, seriously, it does. Now, if a 27-tooth gear were to be used, the difference in the elliptical orbit would be too great, and using a 26-tooth gear would make it too short. The Goldilocks gear has to incorporate a 26.5-tooth gear. But wait, how is that even possible? How do you represent the movement of a 26.5-tooth gear? Well, if you multiply 26.5 by 2, you get 53. Using a 53-tooth gear in conjunction with a 223-tooth gear, as well as a precise cut in a gear like this, the elliptical orbit of the moon is accurately represented. This notch in the gear allows the moon's orbit to be elliptical, and incredibly accurate. One thing these gears have in common is the use of prime numbers and the number of teeth used: 19, 53, and 223. These calculations allow an analog machine like this to even be as accurate and functional as it is. It should be noted that the examination of the Antikythera mechanism has been conducted over the course of almost 120 years, utilizing more sophisticated technology as it became available. It wasn't actually until 1951 that extensive study on the Antikythera mechanism truly began. It was then that Derek de Solla Price took an interest and spent over 20 years studying it. In 1971, Price teamed up with Greek nuclear physicist Charalampos Karakulis to develop X-ray and gamma-ray images of the 82 surviving fragments. Using high-resolution surface scanning, we're now able to read inscriptions that were once covered by centuries of underwater corrosion. The inscriptions themselves offer a great theory as to the precise time period it was constructed. For example, the number pi was inscripted with unequal legs. Writing the number pi in that manner did not begin until the second half of the 2nd century BC. Also, the sigma symbol was inscripted with 2 lines at an angle, as opposed to being horizontal, also from the second half of the 2nd century BC. The omega symbol is inscribed as this instead of this. The theta symbol has a short line in the middle and in one case a dot. Writing these characters in this manner also did not begin until the 2nd century BC. There are several other examples of words or letters inscribed as if they were written by a 2nd century BC writer. Now, some of these observations were not discovered until more thorough examination had been conducted in the 1990s and 2000s. Price published their findings in 1974, and even more interest was sparked by the report on this Antikythera mechanism. Even Jacques Cousteau took note. Yes, that Jacques Cousteau. And in 1976, he took an expedition down to recover and document more items of the Antikythera wreck. Personally, I think the cargo recovered reveals much more about when the ship set sail and ultimately sank. Knowing the destination the ship was coming from would help answer more about where the Antikythera mechanism was possibly built and who had possession of it just prior to its sinking. While there has been a lot of cargo recovered from the wreck, recovering items has proven to be a challenge. The reason for this is because of both the depth and shape of the seafloor. The wreck sits at 40 to 50 meters underwater, a depth that's too deep for traditional scuba divers, yet not deep enough for submersibles. Divers who recover artifacts currently use something called rebreather technology, which allows the divers to remain in the water for hours at a time by recirculating the divers' unused air to allow them to continue breathing. Areas of the site are also covered with boulders that are likely the result of an earthquake in the 4th century AD. These boulders have made extracting artifacts quite difficult to say the least. The coins, statues, glassware, and pottery that have been recovered all give clues to both the ship and to the Antikythera mechanism itself. There have also been numerous bronze statues either recovered or observed from the Antikythera wreck site. It was these statues that caused diver Aelius Deditis to believe he was witnessing an underwater graveyard, which the site technically is. One of the statues even depicts what appears to be a cynic philosopher. Some speculate the statue depicts Archimedes, a Greek scientist and inventor from the 3rd century BC. The glassware recovered points towards both Syro-Palestinian and Egyptian origins. The port of Delos was known as a common port for ships to pick up cargo similar to this in the area. In 166 BC, Delos was declared a free port in an effort to punish the island of Rhodes for not lending support and aid in the Roman war against the Perseus. And the punishment was successful because it's reported that harbor revenues in Rhodes dropped nearly 90%. But whether Delos was either a stopping point or the port of origin for the ship of the Antikythera wreck depends on specifically what year that ship set sail in. In 88 BC, Delos was invaded by Mithridates, the king of Pontus. In this attack, nearly all the 20,000 plus residents were either killed or enslaved. Rome did rebuild Delos, but constant pirate raids made that rebuilding moot. Sometime around 69 and 66 BC, Rome built defensive walls around Delos, but by the end of the 1st century BC, Delos had pretty much already been abandoned for decades. So, calling Delos either the port of origin or even a stopping point for the ship of the Antikythera wreck is strictly based on the exact year that ship set sail. And if it was after 66 BC, it's unlikely Delos was the port of origin or even a stopping point. Most of the pottery either recovered or observed has been determined to have come from what was the latest form of Hellenistic pottery, prior to being replaced by the imported Italian Sigillata. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, knowing and understanding the other artifacts from the shipwreck gives scholars and archaeologists much more insight into the origin of the ship and possibly into the Antikythera mechanism itself. So, bear with me as we take a brief tour through this ancient pottery barn. The Antikythera wreck pottery is a type of pottery referred to as Eastern Sigillata A ware. Now, when it comes to identifying the origins of Eastern Sigillata A, B, and C pottery, archaeologists and historians haven't pinpointed the exact manufacturing place of Type A, but both B and C's manufacturing locations have been identified. For the type found at the Antikythera wreck, distribution patterns for that type suggest a possible origin from northern Syria, more specifically in the region of the Orontes River Valley. The quantity of pottery found also suggests the ship was carrying as cargo, as opposed to personal use for the crew or passengers. Archaeologists were even able to determine which pieces of pottery had actually been used by presumably the crew or passengers, and which ones had not. They also determined that wherever the pottery came from, it was all made in the same workshop, the exceptions being some plates that were determined to have been used by either the crew or passengers. Some of the pottery recovered appeared to be from Kos, Pergamon, Ephesus, and Rhodes. On the handle of a vase recovered, the word Menedorus was inscribed. During my research, I was unable to find anyone of significance in the ancient Mediterranean referred to as Menedorus. However, a recovered cup buried at the wreck site had the name Pamphilus carved in it. Hey, why is that blurred out? Oh god, that's why.
What interesting china. Why, it looks like young men playing leapfrog. Is it Greek?
Oh! I have no idea. I've never seen these bowls before.
Really? Barbara, get me my glasses, will you, dear? They're in my purse by the chair.
Where are my glasses? It is Greek. Yes, Greek boys, actually. Naked Greek boys.
Now, the name Pamphilus has been referenced in numerous texts from the ancient Mediterranean. There was a 4th century BC Greek painter named Pamphilus. But because that Pamphilus lived in the 4th century BC, he couldn't possibly be the same Pamphilus whose cup was discovered at the wreck site. There are also references made to a pharmacist named Pamphilus in the 1st century AD. That Pamphilus also couldn't have been on the ship, because he lived a century too late. And there is also a reference to a Pamphilus in the 1st century BC. Time-wise, this Pamphilus has a better chance of fitting in than the other two. This Pamphilus was a Roman magistrate at some time during the first half of the 1st century BC. There's even several historical coins which have been directly linked to him. While researching these coins, I also found another Roman magistrate who also lived during the same time period as this Pamphilus. His name happened to be, wait for it, Minodoros. Coins linked to him share the exact same spelling as the Minodoros found on the handle of a jar from the wreck. With that being said again, both names were not uncommon for this time period. Honestly, it's probably just a coincidence that these coins bear each of their names, in the same way America has had numerous presidents named George or William. Now, those particular coins were not found at the Antikythera site, but there are coins from the first half of the 1st century BC that feature Pamphilus the magistrate on them. That Pamphilus also had several sons, one of which was named Minodoros. Yeah, I know, it's a one-letter difference between Minodoros and Minodoros. Could possibly be the same person. Well, to be fair, these are the English translations. Here's Minodoros with an E spelled in Greek, and here's Minodoros spelled with an I. And here's the piece of pottery with the name engraved in it. In English, it's only a one-letter difference, but in Greek, it's more like a 3-character difference. Now, is this Greek the same Greek dialect spoken and written during this period? From my limited understanding of the Greek language, the biggest differences between Koine Greek and modern Greek have to do with pronunciation. The spellings are roughly the same. So what do you think? My opinion is that it's inconclusive. Another issue with identifying both Pamphilus and Minodoros is that it appears either of those names weren't uncommon for the time period or the region and were actually used quite regularly. But the passengers were likely wealthy for the time, which narrows down the possibilities some. Think of them as the 1%ers of the 1st century BC. It makes sense for a wealthy magistrate to travel across the Mediterranean on a ship like this. Now, the coins Cousteau recovered have been theorized to have possibly originated from the ancient cities of Pergamon, Ephesus, and Delos. The coins recovered do offer some excellent theories as to the ship's port of departure. Of the 36 silver coins recovered, 32 of them were from Pergamon and 4 were from Ephesus. 40 bronze coins have been recovered, but only 6 have been identified, 3 from Ephesus and 3 from Sicily. Because of the low number of coins recovered so far, it's extremely hard to say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, where the port of departure was. We can narrow it down some, but that's it. The low number of coins recovered is also why the year of the ship sinking can't be, beyond a shadow of a doubt, confirmed and determined, even though the latest date on any of the recovered coins is 67 BC. Cousteau recovered coins dating between 76 and 67 BC, so it's likely the ship sank around 67 BC, or even within a few years after that. If more coins are found in the coming years, and those new artifacts date to a later time period after 67 BC, I think you can officially rule out Delos as either the port of origin, or even a visiting port for the ship, although other researchers have proposed, based on other evidence recovered, that the wreck actually occurred around 60 BC. It should be noted that carbon dating was conducted on the actual hull of the ship itself, after researchers recovered fragments that included 2 nails. During my research, I discovered some discrepancies regarding the ship's possible size. This is probably due to certain English-speaking people who'd rather order a quarter pounder with cheese than a Royale with cheese.
Oh man, they got the metric system. They wouldn't know what the quarter pounder is.
The ship is believed to have been between 160 and 180 feet, or about 50 meters. Some reports have even estimated the size to be somewhere between 48 and 55 meters. The ship was most likely made in Greece from the wood of an elm tree, which is consistent with what and where the Romans often made their boats during the first few centuries BC. Forensic testing confirmed the wood used was from an elm tree, very common for Roman ships of the era. The carbon dating revealed the wood came from the year 220 BC, plus or minus 43 years. This information doesn't indicate when the ship sank, just when it was built. But what did the sunken ship actually look like? Comparing the found hull with what we know Roman ships of the 1st and 2nd centuries BC resembled, this is what some believe the ship may have looked like. Recovered artifacts include jewelry and small bottles that archaeologists think contained luxuries like perfume. This is based on the belief that some of those recovered containers were not intended for long-term storage and preservation.
Other artifacts recovered include furniture, such as bronze beds and couches. The quality of these products just contribute to the theory that some of the passengers were actually part of the wealthy class of the time. Archaeologists seem confident that the ship's destination was the Roman port of Puteoli, today known as Pozzuoli, in the Bay of Naples in Italy. This was a common Roman port for imports such as grain, pottery, statues, and other valuable goods of the era. Something else to note is that in recent years, a possible second ship's hull was discovered at the same site, a site which covers the length of an American football field. Now, I refer to it as a possible second hull because for this artifact to have been part of a single hull would definitely raise some eyebrows, not to mention questions. There's really not a consensus among scholars whether there were multiple ships or just one large ship involved in the Antikythera wreck. If there are hulls from two separate ships, researchers believe both ships at least sank during the same event. As of the completion of this film, analysis of this possible second ship has yet to be concluded. Most likely, if there were two separate ships, they were traveling together, as opposed to the possible second ship being an aggressor or pirates. But there is one theory that suggests the second ship's hull is actually part of the first ship, making it one single ship. One very large, single ship. Ships of that size were not unheard of during the 1st, 2nd, or even 3rd centuries BC. In 2015, Dr. Brendan Foley gave a lecture at Dartmouth on the Antikythera wreck. During his lecture, Dr. Foley mentioned two of the largest ships of this era. One of the ships was the Isis, a Roman grain vessel built in the 2nd century AD. The other ship he mentioned was the Syracusa.
Before I continue, let me state it's highly unlikely that the sunken ship of the Antikythera wreck is this specific ship. It will probably never be determined what the specific ship from the Antikythera wreck ever was called, but by examining other large ships of the era, we might be able to get some idea of what that ship may have looked like.
The Syracusa measured at 110 meters, or 360 feet. It was built in 240 BC and was presented as a gift to Ptolemy II of Egypt. It was also designed by Archimedes, the same guy that may have had a statue resembling him recovered at the Antikythera wreck site. The Syracusa was possibly the largest ship ever built during that era. It was so big, in fact, that Alexandria was the only port in the Mediterranean that could even port the Syracusa. What little was written about it described just how luxurious it was. Numerous decks, stables for 20 horses, and even a library. It took 20 rows of oarsmen to make the Syracusa mobile in the sea. The main voyage to Alexandria is the only written account of the ship being used. It's widely believed that upon docking in Alexandria, it was slowly dismantled over the next century, with the salvage parts being used elsewhere.
But how old is the Antikythera mechanism itself? Well, the inscriptions uncovered by the X-ray and gamma-ray images are written in Koine Greek, and more specifically, a Doric Greek dialect of Koine Greek. Koine Greek was a regional dialect used during the Hellenistic period by the Roman Empire and even the early Byzantine Empire.
Koine Greek was a language used during a 600-year period, starting around 300 BC. Doric Greek was spoken from about 800 BC, and by around 100 BC had transformed into Saconian Greek. A calendar discovered on the Antikythera mechanism in 2008 appears to be the type used in the city-state of Corinth, nearby the ship's discovery, although it should be noted that both Sicily and northwest Greece also used this same calendar.
Because the mechanism was created in the BC era, was it really that great of a device? Honestly, yes. Based on the gears discovered inside, it appears to have been incredibly accurate and reliable when predicting the movements of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 known planets. I already mentioned some of the details involving how the mechanism worked. Overall, it was really accurate in terms of following the celestial bodies of the solar system. And I don't just mean pretty good for the era, I mean pretty good compared to the contemporary technology of even today.
That is, if you forgive the part about the Earth being the center of the universe. That geocentric view is not uncommon during that era, which I'll discuss more about in a moment. A common misconception about civilizations of this era involves them believing the Earth was flat. The ancients didn't believe the world was flat and actually began discovering that it wasn't flat as early as the 6th century BC. While it did take several centuries for most ancient Greeks to agree the Earth was round, it's clear that the creator of the Antikythera mechanism did adhere to the same fact as well. However, even the smartest scientists at the time were limited with how much knowledge they could discover with tools of the era. While many had concluded that the Earth was round, those same scientists and scholars also believed the Sun revolved around the Earth, a view labeled as geocentric. Examining the Antikythera mechanism up close, or at least a reconstruction of it, you'll notice the gears used to display the sun's movement are incredibly accurate. In an ironic way, while the Antikythera mechanism shows the sun revolving around the Earth, it accurately displays the sun's position relative to the other planets and the moon to the Earth, which actually makes it pretty good at predicting solar eclipses. It should also be noted that the Antikythera mechanism's accuracy is based solely on using it along the same longitude and latitude it was designed for. Attempting to use it outside the Mediterranean in any direction will result in incorrect data being projected. With all that being said, what exactly was it used for and who actually used it? And why wasn't this technology ever documented before? It was probably used for a variety of different things. There are several plates recovered that contain numerous instructions for how to use it. It's these plates that are written in Koine Greek. As mentioned earlier, solar and lunar eclipses were just some of the events it could accurately predict. It also kept track of when the original Olympic Games were to be held, which like today were also 4 years apart. Another use of the Antikythera mechanism involved astrology, which was also a common belief back then and was arguably more widespread than it is even today. Emperors and other wealthy Romans at the time commonly made major decisions based on the alignment of the planets and stars. And those types of people were likely the ones who would have used, or at least would have wanted to have used, the Antikythera mechanism. Another common belief during this time period involved earthquakes. The Antikythera mechanism could have been used to possibly predict earthquakes based on the alignment of the sun, moon, and other known planets. A not uncommon belief during this time involved the alignment of our celestial neighbors somehow causing earthquakes. There could very well be not yet known other uses for it. It would be like archaeologists of the future finding your iPhone and determining that it only made phone calls and kept time. I mean, we also used it to write on walls and worship cats, which now that I think about it, is what the ancients did too. How many Antikythera mechanism type devices were actually made is still undetermined, and we'll probably never know the true answer. But if this technology was known and used, why weren't there any records for it? Well, there's not a lot of records for a lot of knowledge from the ancient world. You can actually thank Julius Caesar for this after he burned down the Library of Alexandria in 48 BC. This library had gathered countless scrolls from all across the known world, and after many of these scrolls were destroyed in the fire, it's believed that fire set civilization back over 1,000 years. Remember a few moments ago I mentioned how the Antikythera mechanism was only accurate if used within a certain longitude and latitude? That limitation actually narrows down where it could have also been made. Based on that, there's 4 likely locations it was made. Some scholars argue that a 5th possible location could be Babylon, Mesopotamia. In my opinion, Babylon is so unlikely to be the place of origin in either the construction or the design for the Antikythera mechanism that I'm not even going to cover it, other than to briefly mention it here. This is just in case one day in the future, Babylon is actually discovered to be the absolute definitive place of origin, that this segment of this film can be used in a future film to illustrate how stupid I am to completely dismiss it as a location of origin. One of the much more likely places is Corinth, Rhodes. Corinth was a major Greek city in the Mediterranean that spoke the dialect used on the panels of the device. It was a major port city of the era, and while those two things aren't much, don't forget we're trying to narrow down the cities that lie in the usable latitude of the Antikythera mechanism. With that in mind, Rhodes is another possible place of origin for the exact same reasons. It shares the same language, latitude, and importance that Corinth had. Now, Alexandria is a little lower on the latitude scale geographically, but it still fits and therefore is also a contender for the Antikythera mechanism's place of construction for several reasons. It was home to the Library of Alexandria, prior to Julius Caesar either living in a Stephen King novel or a Monty Python sketch. Alexandria at the time was using the 365-day Egyptian civil calendar, a calendar that was discovered on one of the outer rings used in the Antikythera mechanism. So, we have a pretty good idea of where it was possibly designed and built based on the language. Lastly, Syracuse, Sicily is the final contender for serving as the place of origin. This one's a favorite of mine because 1, they spoke the same dialect as the language written on the panels, 2, it lies in the perfect geographical location for the design, and 3, Well, maybe before I discuss the third reason, we begin the discussion of who designed and invented it. When determining the who, perhaps I should point out a little more information about the Antikythera mechanism itself. We know, based on both computer models and actual recreations of the device, that it was designed to display the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and 5 known planets, as well as solar and lunar eclipses, during the course of a 19-year cycle. Knowing when this cycle was set to begin would definitely shed some light on who possibly created it. So, do we know when it was actually set to begin? With 100% certainty, no we don't. But based on the inscriptions, as well as the displayed solar eclipses, there are some educated guesses. One possible date is April of 205 BC. This month and year were proposed by comparing the device with the Babylonian clay tablets used to keep track of solar eclipses that used a time period of 223 synodic months, which is roughly 18 years and 11.3 days.
Okay, so how does that information lead us to the Antikythera mechanism's origin and creator? There are actually some documented evidence of the Antikythera mechanism and its creator. It just took the mechanism's discovery to decipher what the ancients were actually talking about in these documents.
A 1st century BC dialogue from Marcus Tullius Cicero titled De Republica makes mention of 2 machines that predict the movements of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 known planets of the time. Cicero, the author of this writing, has real credibility. He was a rags-to-riches historian in Rome at the time. He rose from poverty to become a very educated and wealthy lawyer in the Roman Republic, eventually serving Rome as an elected official in several different aspects. Cicero also wrote a lot about the comings and goings of prominent people in the Roman Republic during his lifetime, and even wrote about prominent figures from centuries back. And not just about politicians either. Mathematicians and scientists in Rome were considered some of the smartest people of the known world, and Cicero documented much of their comings and goings as well. Now, if you treat college math classes the way I treated them, which is how Spicoli treated history class, then these ancient mathematicians don't exactly pop up in your memory.
Mr. Hand, will I pass this class? Gee, Mr. Spicoli, I don't know. That's nice. I really like that.
Hipparchus was the father of trigonometry.
Socrates. The only true wisdom consists in knowing that you know nothing.
No, not that ancient philosopher, but I gotta give you an F+ for effort.
That's us, dude. Oh yeah.
Hipparchus lived from about 190 to 120 BC, and his work in the field of mathematics and astronomy occurred during the years 162 and 127 BC. I bring him up because Hipparchus studied and documented numerous astronomical areas, such as the movements of the Sun, the planets, and even our Moon. His work is extensive, and a lot of it is way over my head mathematics-wise. Not only was he one of the leading scientific minds of the time period, but he also resided and died on the island of Rhodes, a possible port of origin for the ship involved in the Antikythera wreck. One uncertain detail that literally changes my opinion on whether Hipparchus created the Antikythera mechanism is whether he believed in a geocentric universe or not, because if he didn't, then why would he design a device that followed that very principle? But if he did believe in a geocentric universe, then it would explain how the Sun's movement is accurate, but only from the perspective as observed from Earth. I encountered conflicting reports in my research as to whether Hipparchus believed in a geocentric universe or not. If anyone during this era and in this region could have designed and constructed a machine like this, he'd be one of the most likely choices, but certainly not the only one. At the very least, his research and work was pivotal in its construction by whoever did create it. A second contender is Posidonius. There are several compelling reasons why Posidonius is a good candidate to be its creator. First, he was born in the Hellenistic city of Apamea in 135 BC. Posidonius was educated in Athens and eventually settled in the city-state island of Rhodes in 95 BC. If anyone from this region in this time period is considered a Renaissance man, it would be him. He was heavily involved in numerous areas of Greek life at the time, including scientific research, physics, astronomy, geology, mathematics, political life, history, seismology, remember earthquakes a few moments ago, anthropology, botany, natural history, meteorology. You get the idea. Cicero actually made 2 separate references to Antikythera mechanism type devices in his writings. In one reference, he cited Posidonius as the creator of one of these devices. Both references described a device that displayed the movements of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 known planets. Posidonius' work in astronomy was ambitious for his time. His work included attempting to measure the size and distance of both the Sun and the Moon. Now, that second reference Cicero made of a similar machine was citing Archimedes of Syracuse as the creator of this other similar device. Wait, you mean the same Archimedes who designed the Syracusa, and that a recovered statue from the Antikythera Rex site is possibly based on? In Cicero's writings, this was all second-hand information handed down from Gaius Sulpicius Gallus, a Roman general and consul that lived in the 2nd century BC. This particular reference took place in 166 BC, in the home of Marcus Marcellus, the grandson of a Roman general with whom he shares a name with. Cicero wrote, "But I will tell you what I have heard from Sulpicius Gallus in the house of Marcellus, who had been his colleague in the consulship. He asked to see a celestial globe, which Marcellus's grandfather had saved after the capture of Syracuse, without bringing home any other memorial of so great a victory. I had often heard the celestial globe or spear mentioned on account of the great fame of Archimedes. Its appearance, however, did not seem to me particularly striking. There is another, more elegant in form and more generally known, molded by the same Archimedes and deposited by the same Marcellus in the Temple of Virtue at Rome." But as soon as Gallus had began to explain by his sublime science the composition of this machine, I felt that the Sicilian geometrician must have possessed a genius superior to anything we usually conceive to belong to our nature. He added that the figure of the sphere, which displayed the motions of the sun and moon and the 5 planets, or wandering stars, could not be represented by the primitive solid globe. The invention of Archimedes was admirable because he had calculated how a single revolution should maintain unequal and diversified progressions and dissimilar motions. In fact, when Gallus moved the sphere or planetarium, we observed the moon distance the sun as many degrees by a turn of the wheel in the machine as she does in so many days in the heavens, from whence it resulted that the progress of the sun was marked as in the heavens, and that the moon touched the point where she is obscured by the earth's shadow at the instant the sun appears above the horizon. Gallus is best remembered as the general who accurately predicted a lunar eclipse the night before the Battle of Pydna on June 21st, 168 BC. But before Gallus got a hold of this Antikythera mechanism type device at the home of Marcellus, Marcellus's grandfather, the one he shared a name with, had to actually come into possession of this device first. In 213 BC, the grandfather Marcellus began leading an army to invade Syracuse. During this time, Archimedes was residing there, and his numerous military inventions literally defended Syracuse from the invading Roman army for 2 years. Archimedes was able to conceive these vast defense weapons because of his extensive knowledge and education for the time. To give you an example of how intelligent Archimedes was, he practically invented modern calculus and even derived an accurate approximation of pi. Unfortunately for Archimedes, his fate was sealed the moment one of Marcellus's centuries entered Syracuse through a deceptive disguise. Once Marcellus's army had an open gate to the city, it was only a matter of time before it would be completely under their control. In the ensuing battle, Archimedes is killed in his workshop by his sentry, and it's reported by Cicero that Marcellus acquired an astronomical device from Archimedes' workshop, which he returned home with and passed down eventually to his grandson. Marcus Claudius Marcellus was not just a general, but a well-known, respected member of the Roman council at that time. It's reported that Marcellus had such great respect for Archimedes and for his war machines that after Archimedes' death, Marcellus ordered and arranged for his body to be buried with honors, going so far as to erect a sphere with a cylinder on top of his tomb. If Marcellus had as much respect and admiration as reported, it's not totally out of the question that he would take from Archimedes' workshop and preserve, or at least admire, any devices and inventions that may have been constructed. If the device described by Cicero was in fact the Antikythera mechanism, and if Marcellus's grandson was in fact in possession of it, then is it possible this mentioned device was the same device that sank sometime in the 60s BC off the coast of Antikythera? There is some evidence that points in that direction. Analysis of the Antikythera mechanism revealed the artifact itself was built sometime around 100 BC. The language and dialect used on the panels reflects that time period as well. The design, on the other hand, point towards the device with a starting date of April of 205 BC. The device itself was possibly created either by Hipparchus, Posidonius, or Archimedes. I'm a betting man, and with the current amount of evidence, my money is actually on Archimedes, at least for the design. However, with more convincing evidence presented, I can be persuaded that someone else actually designed and built it. If it is Archimedes, that makes both the location and time period of the Antikythera mechanism's creation to Syracuse, sometime before the year 212 BC, which would coincide with the possible start date of April of 205 BC, even if that start date is after Archimedes' death. General Marcus Claudius Marcellus, who led the siege at Syracuse and had great respect for Archimedes, likely took the Antikythera mechanism from Archimedes' workshop after his death. It appears Marcellus kept the device in his possession, where it became a family heirloom, eventually getting passed down to his grandson. Cicero wrote on an account where Marcellus' grandson, who shares the same name, showed Gaius Gallus an Antikythera mechanism-like device at some point in 168 BC. On June 21st, 168 BC, Gallus accurately predicted a lunar eclipse to his army right before the Battle of Pydna. Gaius Claudius Marcellus Minor lived from 88 BC to 40 BC and was a direct descendant of the same General Marcellus who may have taken possession of an Antikythera mechanism type device in 212 BC. If the Antikythera mechanism remained in the hands of the Claudius family, then it's possible Marcellus Minor could have been in possession of the device. In fact, if all or even any of this is true, then it's almost certain that Marcellus Minor was in possession of an Antikythera mechanism. This Marcellus was reportedly also close allies with Cicero, and neither were allies of Julius Caesar, who formed the first triumvirate with Marcus Licinius Crassus and Natius Pompeius Magnus in 60 BC, a possible year the ship carrying the Antikythera mechanism may have set sail and sank.
You two are the most powerful men in Rome. But as long as you fight with each other, neither of you will get what you want. You won't get your tax cuts, and you will never pay off your soldiers. You're in a stalemate, and the only way to break it is to work together. Then nothing will stand in your way.
But it also could have set sail and sank as early as 67 BC. The latest knowledge, as of the release of this film, is that there were either two ships found at the site of the Antikythera wreck, but the two different discovered hulls are actually one giant hull. Whether it's one ship or two, it's likely they traveled from either Pergamon, Ephesus, or Delos. Considering the cargo, archaeologists believe the Roman port of Puteoli in the Bay of Naples in Italy was also the likely destination. In 60 BC, Rome was still a republic, and it was in that year that the first triumvirate was formed by Natius Pompeius Magnus, Marcus Licinius Crassus, and Julius Caesar. By 60 BC, the descendants of General Marcellus were still active and influential people in the Roman Republic. While numerous human bones, which include a skull, have been recovered, DNA analysis at this point has either been inconclusive or not yet completed. The only two names that we think were either passengers or crew members are Pamphilos and Menindoros, neither of which were not uncommon names for either the region or the time period. If either of these names were in fact passengers, it's inconclusive whether they are the same or even just relatives of the early 1st century BC Roman magistrate mentioned in ancient documents and texts.
Although it should be mentioned again that based on the recovered items, like jewels and furniture, that any passengers would have been extremely wealthy for the time period, the Roman 1%ers. It's impossible to say with 100% certainty that any of these theories are true, but these theories are at least built on educated guesses taking into account what information we have about the ancient Mediterranean world at that time. It is, in my opinion, a great, if not the best, educated theory behind the Antikythera mechanism's origins. I can see why the Antikythera mechanism has become an obsession for archaeologists and historians. In the coming years and decades, it's likely new artifacts will be uncovered that could disprove what we think we know about the Antikythera mechanism, as well as provide ideas for new theories we have not even thought of yet.
In 2012, the Greek government granted Dr. Brandon Foley, the same marine archaeologist whose lecture I cited at Dartmouth, permission to conduct a series of archaeological dives at the site of the Antikythera wreck. While I'm currently not scuba certified, I have been scuba diving myself, and while it's a very fun and exciting activity, it can also be very dangerous. It's hard to imagine conducting an archaeological excavation while scuba diving at the same time. Communication is essential while scuba diving, and communicating underwater can sometimes prove difficult. But that's not even the most difficult aspect of marine archaeology, especially at the Antikythera wreck site. To aid in the recovery efforts, new scuba techniques and technology were developed specifically for the difficult task of reaching the Antikythera wreck site itself. As mentioned earlier, the wreck site is too deep for traditional scuba divers and too shallow for submersibles to reach the site. Rebreather technology has given Dr. Foley and his team the opportunity to reach the site and recover artifacts that otherwise would not be easily attainable, if at all. Decompression is something scuba divers commonly have to do. When a diver dives down so many feet or meters, gases start to build up in their body. This is due to the pressure caused by the depth of the water. The deeper you go, the bigger the pressure gets, literally. When a diver descends in the water, the hydrostatic pressure rises, and therefore the ambient pressure rises as well. Because breathing gas is applied at ambient pressure, some of the gas dissolves into the diver's blood and is transferred by the blood to other tissues. Inert gas such as nitrogen or helium continues to be taken up until the gas dissolved in the diver is in a state of equilibrium with the breathing gas in the diver's lungs, at which point the diver is saturated for that depth and breathing mixture, or until the depth and therefore the pressure is changed. This is why divers need to decompress. A mismanaged decompression usually results from reducing the ambient pressure too quickly for the amount of gas solution to be eliminated safely. Divers at the Antikythera site have to decompress for 90 minutes following a dive. The Return to Antikythera project has conducted numerous dives, utilizing both manned divers and unmanned underwater robots. Starting in 2014, the team started using the atmospheric diving system. This exosuit allows divers the ability to remain submerged for up to 50 hours and to go down up to 1,000 feet underwater, and newer prototypes boosted the ability to go as deep as 2,000 feet. Wait a minute, I think I know how this is going to end.
The only way the ancient astronaut theory can be disproven is when the extraterrestrials show up.
Oh boy, could aliens just abduct this guy already?
The Antikythera mechanism and the wreck associated with it will continue to be a developing story in the coming years. And with the Return to Antikythera project looking like they'll continue their work recovering artifacts from the wreck, there's no telling what new information could come to light in the years ahead. If you're interested in keeping up with the Return to Antikythera project yourself, find them on social media. They even have a YouTube channel set up. If anything major or groundbreaking gets discovered in the coming years, you can expect a follow-up film to this one on my channel. The Antikythera mechanism has become a quest, much like a treasure hunt for gold. For many people invested, the treasure at the end isn't gold, rather the knowledge and insight into what we now think was the most advanced piece of technology, not just for the ancient world, but for over 1,000 years after it sank into the Mediterranean. The impact this artifact has left on historians and archaeologists is a tremendous one. Ironically, the device being lost to the sea for 2,000 years probably preserved it in a way that events above the surface would never have allowed. But it also serves as a constant reminder of how much the ancients actually knew about the world and the universe, and how little we actually know about them. Well, that is it for this episode of The Bearded Nerd. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click the thumbs up if you liked the video, and to subscribe to keep up with future videos. See you next time.